Welcome back to Mean Streets, where each week we investigate the best, worst, and forgotten movies of film noir.
I'm Luke Deckard.
And I'm Matthew Booth. And today's case is Batman, CAPED Crusader from 2024, starring Hamish Linklater, Jason Watkins, and Diedrich Bader. Created and produced by Bruce Timm. The logline is, after a family tragedy, affluent philanthropist Bruce Wayne transforms into the Batman, where his crusade for justice spawns unforeseen ramifications. An easy tagline for a well-known story.
Batman.
Does this Batman again? Batman again.
But it's animated this time. It's a different version of Batman, kind of.
Kind of, yeah. And it does some interesting things. What are your initial thoughts on this?
In general, I really liked the show. I thought it was wonderfully pulpy, wonderfully noir. The visuals were very good. It felt like you were, thinking about the opening of the show, the black and white opening of the show. It really, in that kind of, film grainy aspect that they added to it. It had a lot of really great 1940s noir vibes to it that I very much enjoyed. It's very broody, very atmospheric, and a nice, it's Bruce Timm who, did Batman, the animated series back in the 90s. I think that visual style that they did for that show is by far the best visual style for Batman ever. Even against live action Batman. I love that world, and I loved going back to that style of Batman. Generally I thought it was very good. What about you?
Yes, so did I. And I agree about the design of it. I like the fact that you can tell that Bruce Timm's done this, because it has similarities with the animated series from the 90s. But it is also its own beast, and it does its own thing. But stylistically, and the way it looks, it is brilliant to look at. It's lovely to look at. And I agree, those opening credits almost make me wish that the whole thing was in black and white. I think that would have been quite an interesting step to take, to be quite honest. But
yeah,
I've always enjoyed Batman from his original incarnation, as it were, the original Bob Kane, Bill Finger scripts, where he looks like this Batman. I prefer my Batman to have the bigger ears than people like Jim Lee give him, on Ben Affleck and even Adam West. And it's good to see that incarnation of the character on screen and done well. And of course, you can do things with animation you can't do with live action. So the way he moves is excellent. So yeah, overall, I thought this was good. It did some interesting things that with characters and with storylines that we've not seen before, which we can discuss. And I think it had a good supporting cast. You can't go wrong with Batman, really, with a supporting cast. But I think this one was particularly well done.
It was. Yeah, I definitely want to dive into that stuff. But maybe let's give people some background, because maybe not everyone knows about Bruce Timm and the stuff that he sort of did. It's interesting. So WB initially wanted Bruce to do a sequel series to The New Adventures of Batman, which ran from 97 to 99, which was already a sequel to Batman the Animated Series. They wanted
not quite as good. I never thought it was quite as good. I preferred the original series.
Yeah, I definitely tuned out of the Batman cartoons in this period. I was still a kid and I was still watching cartoons, but I'm a grown ass adult and I'm still watching cartoons. But you know what I mean. I tuned out of Batman in those years and moved on to other things. But they kind of want to do something like what Marvel did with X-Men 97. He let's continue the past. Let's keep it going. Interestingly, Timm said no. And I'm like, so I'm curious. Would you? I mean, this show is very good. CAPED Crusader is very good. But would you be more interested in a continuation of the animated series, or do you think this was the right choice?
No, I think this was the right choice, to be quite honest. And I especially think that since the death of Kevin Conroy, I don't think you could. He was so unmistakable as Batman's voice and as Bruce Wayne's voice, and he was so obviously inherently linked to that original series, which is where he first played the role, that if you tried to recast it but pretend it was the same universe as that original series, it would have been a big mistake, I think.
Yeah, it's always tricky when you want to recast the voice actors. I know they recently did that with another animated show called Rick and Morty, there's some drama with the guy there was one guy, Justin Roiland, who does the voice for Rick and Morty, and he had some issues that caused him to get fired from the show or removed from the show, and they recast two people to do both of those. Well, one person do Rick, another person do Morty, and it felt weird to the ears. It felt weird to the ears.
Yeah, and Kevin Conroy was so associated with the role, and did such good work with it, consistently good work with it. Not always with good scripts, it has to be said, but consistently good work, voice actor work.
Yeah,
and I think it would have been a mistake. I don't know whether that was a conscious choice. I suspect it wasn't a conscious choice that to separate it because of Conroy, but no. I think it was the right decision to say, no, that was then, and this is now, and we want to do something a bit different with it. Absolutely, the right choice.
Yeah, so Tim, it had nothing to do with Conroy at all. Actually, it sounds like, from what I understand, like Tim was just like he just didn't want to do the sequel. So what he did, there were a lot of constraints with that show because it was geared for kids, and basically what he did is he put forward a lot of ideas that he initially had for Batman the Animated Series. Things about being more pulpy, more serial, more mystery, more film noir, kind of versions of the characters in the stories. And he's like, if you want me to do something, this is what I want to do. And from there, Matt Reeves and J.J. Abrams caught wind of what Tim was doing, and I guess they wanted in on the action.
yeah.
Because they were like, yeah, we like this. We'll back you up.
Can we help?
Yeah. It's funny because you see names like Matt Reeves and you think, and JJ, and you think, oh right, they must have helped get this show off the ground. No. This is Bruce Timm's idea. This is Bruce Timm's stuff. He was the one who was like, this is what I want to do. And these guys are like, let's get involved. I did a gritty noir Batman movie, Matt Reeves.
yeah. I know what I'm talking about, honest.
Yeah. And so I just found it funny that they actually came in later in the process to sort of back him up. But I guess two people, if you want two people in your corner, having the guy who did the most successful Batman movie in a very long time, and J.J. Abrams, who is for some reason incredibly rich and powerful in Hollywood, despite being incredibly untalented, is a couple of good people to have in your corner, I suppose.
Good, one's good for. Well, I mean, Matt Reeves' Batman's very much of the same general ilk as this cartoon series, isn't it? In the sense that it is very much a film noir. And it's very much Batman at the beginning of his career. Yeah. So I can understand that Reeves might bring something interesting to the writing table or to the production table. And I suppose Abrams brings clout and cash. I don't know.
Exactly. Now we have the problem that we've talked about on other episodes about the dumping of a whole series on streaming. I much more prefer like episodic stuff, as in week by week sort of thing. But Batman, the Caped Crusader had some interesting issues. WB has just been an absolute poop show for years because of David Zaslav. Like, absolute disaster. Like, you have the Batwoman, the Batgirl movie that had starred Michael Keaton or co-starred Michael Keaton, and that was just erased and buried. Some gangster whacked him and threw that film in the river with some cement boots, and you know what I mean. And then you have like the Flash that was rewritten and redone, to erase the connection to Batgirl and all this stuff. And they're canceling stuff, they're burying stuff. There's a Scooby-Doo movie that they had that WB canceled, and all this tax writing stuff. It just reeks of corruption. It reeks of the Hollywood corruption that like Raymond Chandler writes about.
Yeah, absolutely. It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Massively.
Chandler, I'm rereading The Little Sister at the minute, just as an aside, and it's all over that. It's all over that novel.
Yep.
And you're right. It's as relevant today as it was in 1947 or whenever it was.
Oh my God, absolutely. So the poor show was canceled because it was going to go to Cartoon Network and HBO Max, but then WB canceled it with a bunch of their other animated projects due to their quote cost cutting measures, and it's like, all right, great. So then this poor show was canceled and then had nowhere to be It was made, it was done, but had nowhere to go. And that's when Amazon Prime picked it up and then renewed it for a second series, which I'm glad that we got the one series. I'm glad that we're getting a second, but it's just, it baffles me right now how I guess this is the big problem with having like these like corporate douchebags in charge of stuff who have no investment in the creative process, or they just want quick return. It's very Wall Street. It's very Wall Street.
Yeah,
if they can't get their quick return, dump, sell.
Yeah. We talked about this on other episodes. It's the interference of studios that causes some films that could have been good to be absolutely horrendous. Causes some films not to appear at all, as you just said, and causes some people to walk away from projects that they were obviously right for.
Yeah.
You know, and it's happened since the whole studio system, I suspect. But you know, you think somebody would wake up, wouldn't you? You think somebody would say, "Look, leave us to make the film, and you make the money by distributing it and, you know, selling it and whatever." But none of you are writers and producers and actors or directors, so, you know, go away in the politest possible.
And also, like, certain things just take time. I mean, I saw somewhere on Twitter, I think it was today actually, someone had done a tweet saying that like shows like Friends and The Office and all that sort of certain things like that, if they were made today, would have been canceled after one season. They just wouldn't have been given the. And I agree with that. Like,
I agree with that.
It's bad, but true.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if you look at, I mean, there are a lot of series from the past where it might be the third season before they kick into gear, you know, and now they wouldn't stand a chance, and we'd be robbed of all those possibilities.
Yeah,
you know, potentially.
It's nuts. So the Batman Cape Crusader was definitely being thrown around and battered around by WB corporate shenanigans, but it finally found its place. I'm glad that it did, and
I'm glad it did.
Hopefully we'll get more than 2 series. Like if it picks up and goes on, then I think that'd be good. Now, a bit about the writing of this show. So there's a lot of different writers. It's a TV show. We're not going to go into every single writer on this show, but Bruce Timm is the main producer and showrunner of it, and Ed Brubaker was the head writer. Now, interestingly, he's not going to be he's not in charge of season 2. So that'll be interesting to see what changes there are. But he wasn't the only reason he wasn't back was a mixture of scheduling issues and the Writers Guild of America strike that happened. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see the tonal differences, or if there are big differences with the writing compared to season 1 and season 2. I hope not, but I hope there's a couple of things that they tweak. But I'll dive into that. I'll come on to that shortly. So what do you think about the Cape Crusader? Because this show, what Tim was wanting to do is basically reshape the audience's perception. This is his quote. He wants to reshape the audience perception of the Batman mythologies in a way that the animated series did as well. Most of the versions of Batman right now in pop culture are quite. There were elements where you can sort of kind of connect with him and relate, where things that he wanted to do with Batman the Animated Series that he was able to do with Cape Crusader was this version of Batman is what he says is more aloof and almost inhuman. You can kind of feel that with Batman's character throughout this.
You do get that impression. Yeah, you do get that impression. It's good that he's starting at the beginning of his career as Batman, as I said earlier, because there's time for him to grow. There's time for him to learn from his mistakes. But I do get the sense that he's very distant and very internalized. The fact that he calls Alfred Pennyworth all the way through until, I think it's a nice idea. I think it's a good idea because it allows for that relationship to develop, and it allows for there to be a bit of humanity later on in the series when he thinks Alfred's dead.
Spoiler for all episodes.
Spoiler for all episodes. Rather than it being that relationship which, is surrogate father and son all the way through, because then there's nowhere for that to go. I know that it's certain other adaptations of Batman we're later down the line in Bruce Wayne's life. You know, the Nolan films and things like that, the Keaton films. We're later down in Batman's life. But for this, like, Bruce Wayne is totally focused on what he thinks his mission is, and he can't see beyond it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to start this character off, and it's a good way to introduce that character, because it's not necessarily the one that we've seen. We all know Bruce Wayne is obsessed. We all know Bruce Wayne is slightly psychotic, and we know why. You know, we obviously know why, because we've seen it done to death in many different films. He's also got a heart in most of the other adaptations that we've seen and that we've had, even in the animated series.
Oh God,
he has that little, you know, he's very socially aware, whereas here he is just a man on a mission, and when he puts that costume on, that is all he's going to do. You know, he doesn't care who gets hurt or who gets in the way. He's just got to go and do what he's got to do. And I think that's that sort of brutal side to him that he's got to have, the character's got to have, is really, really highlighted in this show. And I think it's good. I think it's well handled.
Yeah, you can really tell. I mean, you know, Tim is very upfront about how unapologetically noir this show really is, and you could feel influences from Sam Spade. You could feel influences from Mike Hammer in this version of Batman, because Sam Spade and Mike Hammer versus, you know, Marlowe and some of the others. You can also probably put in the Constantine Lop in this as well. Are very just mission focused.
Yeah, Hammer certainly.
Yeah, they beat the bejesus out of people. They're not afraid to do any of that kind of stuff. They're not in the mood for romance. They're not in the mood for any of that kind of stuff. This is my mission. I'm going to see it done, and I will die getting it done. Yeah,
and they've all got that sense of it doesn't matter who gets hurt in the process.
Yes,
you know, and this absolute conviction that they are right.
Yeah,
that what they are doing is the right thing to do, and they will not be shaken from that. You know, they never waver from the fact that they know they're right, even when perhaps sometimes they're not. They are absolutely assured in their own minds that they are right, and that you're right. This version of Batman is not yet questioning whether he's making a difference, which the animated series often did. Certainly did in a very famous episode where he says, you know, I win a few battles here and there, but nothing's changing. Yeah. And in the Reeves film, he says something similar. He says, you know, I've been doing this for 2 years and it's getting worse. It's not getting better, it's getting worse, or whatever it is. This Batman hasn't yet had any thoughts like that at all. This Batman is just, they're bad and I'm the answer.
Yes.
You know, and everyone else can just go along with it or get lost. That's very much the vibe of this particular incarnation of Bruce Wayne, I think.
Yeah. I'm interested to also chat about like the 1940s setting. This is where like kid brain comes in. Tim and the producer of the show, it was a conscious choice to set this show in the 1940s in order to keep it separate from the animated series. Now, I guess the problem that I have is that when I think about the animated series, that show already looked and felt like it was in the 40s.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was right off the back of the first Tim Burton film, wasn't it? I don't think we'd even had Batman Returns. I don't think. Maybe we had. I can't remember.
I think they maybe just came out. Just came out.
Well, but certainly the '89 version was out. And it does the same as that film, which is it's in a sort of Never Neverland. You know, so everyone dresses as if it's 1940.
Yeah,
but he's got this ridiculous, ultra high-tech car and computer capabilities that would blow the minds of people in 1940.
Yes,
you know, so it was a sort of no man's land of time.
Yeah,
which I thought worked quite well, because then you can honestly say something like this can happen, because it's clearly not the real world. It only looks like you're the real world. You know, people act in realistic ways, and it's a skewed version of the real world, but it's a skewed version where this can all happen. This is all believable.
Yeah.
By setting it in the 1940s, which I think is a great idea, and taking Batman right back to his roots, in publication roots, he hasn't got that computer, has he? He's got a map of Gotham on like a Perspex board or whatever it is.
Yes.
And he hasn't got all those gadgets. He's got the car, but it's just like the car in the Batman film.
Yes. It's just a car.
It hasn't got those big sort of parachutes that Adam West has got, and that makes it turn corners and things. So this is very much grounded in reality. So I agree that the 90s series did look as if it was the 1940s until you saw all those modern trappings.
Yeah.
But there is no denying that this is the 1940s.
Yeah.
And all the better for it, because it gives them the opportunity, I think, to make it noir and unapologetically noir by setting it in the noir period.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely helped itself out.
Yeah, it did. And I like the fact that he hasn't got all those gadgets and computers and things, because he's got to rely on his brain. And one of my complaints about Batman on screen is that we don't see him as a detective often enough.
Mm. And
that really is what he is. He's just that he's not got a deerstalker or a fedora and a trench coat. He's got a cape and cowl.
Yeah.
But at his heart, he's a detective. These were detective stories in comic strip form.
Yes.
And the fact we've got that now in a very recognizable mystery and crime thriller setting, music to my ears.
Yeah.
Answer my eyes.
The other thing I really liked about this series is scattered throughout are lots of different sorts of references throughout Batman's history. And it's one of those things where the show doesn't like shove Easter eggs and member berries in your face. It's more just, if you know, and it makes it just a little bit more fun for you.
It does. There are a few things like that. Catwoman lives on Luton Avenue, which this is not a coincidence. I refuse to accept this as a coincidence unless Bruce Timm comes to my house and tells me so to my face. Curse of the Cat People. And the Cat People were made by Val Lewton. The films in the 40s were made by Val Lewton, directed by Val Lewton. Now, you can't tell me that that's a coincidence. The Catwoman lives on Luton Avenue.
Definitely not.
And in the Clayface episode, which is one of my favourites, you've got Basil Carlo, famous horror actor. Well, I don't need to say what that is, do I? That's
just for the people who might not know.
Well, that's Boris Karloff, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's a more obvious one. But the man the makeup designer who makes Clayface's whatever it is that makes his face change. The way he's drawn, he's a spitting image of Jack Pierce, who was the Universal horror movie makeup man. He did Lon Chaney's Wolfman. He did Karloff's Frankenstein.
Yeah.
He did Karloff's Mummy. And if you know what Jack Pierce looks like, and then you look at that character in the Caped Crusader, there is no doubt that they are, they know what they're doing, and they're modelling that character on Pierce, who was not particularly popular, certainly not with Lon Chaney. So that relationship is very, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing with those. But like you say, they're not signposted. They're just there if you get them, and if you don't get them, you've not lost out. If you do get them, there's just a little extra bit of frisson, that runs down the back of your spine.
I got the vibe that Hamish Linklater, who plays the voice of Batman, his voice is a mixture of Conroy and Pattinson.
Yeah.
It really moves between the two depending on the scene and what's going on. And I liked it. It sometimes it jarred, but I in general I even liked that sort of stuff.
Batman's got to have a different voice. Keaton was the first one to do it. Then Conroy, and then of course Christian Bale just takes that ball and runs a mile with it to ludicrous extent. I think Linklater does a pretty good job here, and I think they are different enough that you can believe that nobody recognizes his voice.
Yes. Well, I really like the fact that I like the differences between what Bruce is like and what Batman is like, and it's in some ways it's similar to it's similar to Michael Keaton's Batman, who when he's out in public is quite cool and suave or whatever, but then when he's alone, he's more, introspective and things like that.
Yeah,
you kind of get that vibe from him because I like how his Bruce's the register of his voice goes up, and it's a bit like Michael Jackson, isn't it? Where it's like the high register is the performance.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just going to make that point, because what strikes me about this series, and it's never struck me before. I've always sort of thought Bruce Wayne's voice is his natural voice, and he puts a voice on to be Batman. But this is the reverse, because there's a great bit where he's in therapy with Quinzel, and he's talking up here. His register's up here. When a minute he gets in the car with Alfred, it's down there. And he talks to Alfred in the Batman voice. Well, he wouldn't do that, would he? If he was putting that one on.
Yeah.
So I'm convinced that this particular Batman, the Bruce Wayne, is definitely the performance, including the voice, and the real person is the one that's in the cave.
Yes, which makes sense because it sort of goes back to that, there's that line, I think it's in Batman Begins, where Katie Holmes's character is like, no, this is the Bruce Wayne is the mask, Batman is who you are, and this show really gets that, I think, that dichotomy in a better way than maybe what we've seen elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. I think it does, and it's very clear that is what it's saying. It makes some very definite decisions about how this character is going to be, and that is one of them. There's no debating that Bruce Wayne is the performance in this particular show, I don't think.
Yeah. So the other thing I quite liked about this show is it in many ways felt like I was reading a 10-issue comic book event. Right? Each episode sort of built on the next little by little. Not that there was a particular big bad that it was building to, kind of, but there were elements and character things that were building along the way, and I like that. And I think the other thing that struck me the most with the way they sort of told this story is it is very you could easily just watch any episode that you want and pick up and know and get things, which I liked. But I just really enjoyed how nicely character driven this thing was.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, I don't know about you, what your opinion is, but I sort of, in some ways, I felt like the show was Batman light, in that Batman is there, he's doing stuff, he's saving the day, but in many ways, I almost found him to be a supporting character.
Yeah, I agree.
In the show. Yeah.
I agree. And if you think about it, Batman can only go out at night, can't he? Otherwise, he doesn't work. So if you lived in Gotham City, you wouldn't see him all that often, would you? He wouldn't be around all that often. And I think I'm not sure you could do it with many other characters, and I'm not going to try and think one off the top of my head, but I'm not sure you could do it with many others. But Batman's supporting cast is so interesting in itself. You can put the spotlight on them more than you could with other comic book characters, and other fictional characters.
Yes.
I mean, the TV series Gotham was all about that, wasn't it? It was all about the people.
Yeah, but I hated that
Bruce
show.
Wayne.
That show was dog shit.
I knew you'd hate Gotham.
God, it was terrible.
But
4 foot.
and the big comic books were about the Gotham City Police Department, and there have been comic books that have been more about Gordon, say, than Batman.
Well, Batman Year One.
Year One is a Gordon story. It's a Gordon story. So I think, and Batman should be mysterious. Batman should be something that, well, I don't believe in him until I see him. Again, if you lived in Gotham City and somebody said there's a giant bat walking around, you would say, wouldn't you? What are you talking about? It's absolute nonsense. And I think he should be a figure of mystery. I think he should be in the shadows. I don't think you should see too much of him, quite frankly. I think he should appear when he needs to appear. And again, in the Clayface episode where Montoya is held hostage, that's what Batman should be. He arrives just in the nick of time, just at the right time. A bit like he does in the Burton film, where Nicholson's terrorizing Kim Basinger in in the museum.
Yeah.
Or the art gallery, whatever it is. And he comes through the window. Well, there's an almost shot-for-shot reproduction of that in the Clayface episode where he comes through the glass roof, the skylight, and his cape is almost identical to Keaton's.
Yeah.
That's what Batman should be. He should just come out of nowhere, and disappear again once he's done what he's got to do. So, yeah, it is Batman light, but I think it is all the better for it, quite frankly.
I think in many ways, and I think one of the reasons that I kind of appreciate it is because one of my criticisms that I have is I found, interestingly or not, I found Batman to be the most uninteresting character in the show.
Yeah, I can go along with that.
Which is,
I can go along with that.
It's a bit. Therefore, it's almost like I sort of understood why the animated series devoted a bit more time to Batman's character.
Mm-hmm.
To make sure that kids watching the show can connect with Batman in a different way. He is very aloof, to the point that as an audience, person in the audience watching the show, I'm like, I don't feel like I connect with you like at all. Which job well done, because he is meant to be aloof and almost inhuman, according to Tim. But I do sort of think maybe, and this is what I'm hoping in future seasons, not that he needs to like lighten up or brighten up by any means, but I would like, you went very Spade, very, Hammer. Maybe sprinkle some Marlowe in next.
Put some Marlowe, yeah. Well, it's the old writing thing, isn't it? Of how do you do a character arc? Well, the first thing you do is think, how do you want your character to be at the end?
Yes.
And then at the beginning, you make him the complete opposite.
Yeah.
That's how you do a character arc in very broad terms.
Yeah.
So he's got to start like this, hasn't he? If he's going to have any character growth, So I think it'd be a big mistake if they don't do that. I agree they shouldn't lighten him up, and I agree that he should retain most of what he is in this first series in the second series, but he has to develop and he has to grow. Because he would. You can't go out night after night dressed as a bat and do what he does without learning some things,
Yes.
And honing your technique and things like that. So he's got to learn. He's got to learn how to trust people, because I don't think he trusts anybody at the minute at all. And again, it's all part of the psychology of Batman. He is on his own. He's completely internal. So it makes sense that he doesn't trust people.
Yes.
How can he? Really?
But slowly throughout the show, he's gaining friends.
He's gaining friends, and also what I like about this show, which again, maybe it's the benefit of being able to do it over 10 episodes. But there are people who, Montoya is a great example of this. There are people who don't like him to start off with, but start to see actually there's something here. There's something good about him, and he is here to help. And so she's growing as well. Those characters are growing as well. And there's a lot of character growth in this for what is essentially a 25-minute an episode cartoon. There's a lot of
very well written.
Good
very
writing
well
in
written.
this. Good character-driven writing.
You mentioned Montoya. She was a character who I really grew to like over the course of the show. I didn't know how I was going to take to her at first. I kind of didn't like her at the beginning. There was just something I was just a little bit prickly about her at first, but I really began to take to her by the end. There are two characters in this show that were originally created in Batman the Animated Series, or for Batman the Animated Series. And then as a result of that creation became huge in the comic books, and Montoya is one of those. But she was actually added to the comics before her animated debut. So they had her in the episode, had it all ready to go, but then they released a comic book with her in there. So they did some interesting things with her character that are different to kind of what we've seen previously, injecting a little bit of queerness to her, which is something that I think was something that I think that Tim wanted to explore originally, but wasn't fully able to do, and put her in a relationship with Dr. Quinzel.
Yeah.
Harley Quinn.
Harley Quinzel.
Yes. What did you make of Harley Quinn?
I loved what they did with Harley Quinn. I have a love-hate relationship with Harley Quinn, who I think is she's the second character that was created for the animated series.
Yeah, she was created for the animated series.
She's a Bruce Timm creation, and I think he originally wanted her to be more like she is in this than she was in the animated series. And what happened was they made her the Joker's sidekick.
Yes.
And this is the first time I've really got on board with Harley Quinn. Because I never really liked her in the animated series. I didn't like the voice. I didn't like Arlene Sorkin's voice. I found her irritating more than anything else. And I never really understood why the Joker would have a sidekick. Anyway, what would he possibly see in her? What would he want with her? It didn't make any sense to me as when I watched it for the first time, and it never has since. And why she's quite as popular as she's become, I'm not really sure or convinced by. But this version, yeah, she's interesting. She's got some interesting stuff going on, and I like the fact that they seem to have got rid of that over the top clown characteristic and depiction, and gone for something. She is the epitome of the lunatic running the asylum.
Yes,
which is something that they've always. But it's always been Jeremiah Arkham who's been the lunatic running the asylum. But to make it Quinzel, I think is a brilliant twist.
I
not
really
one that you would see coming, not one you necessarily see coming.
Yeah,
when you learn it's Quinzel, you think, oh, when Bruce Wayne is in therapy with Dr. Harleen Quinzel, you say that's Harley Quinn. Okay, she's going to be in it. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily make that connection, and you don't see that that's how she's going to be. There's no clue that that's how she's going to be until she arrives in the Harley Quinn costume. Yeah, and she's a lot more violent in this and dangerous in this.
Yeah,
and I think it's for the better. I really do.
Yeah, there are two things I really liked about this version of Harley Quinn, and one is that I like the fact they strip away that she is the creation of the Joker. And quite in general, this TV show strips away with the concept of the male villains with the pretty girl on their arm, which I really like that.
Yeah, I like that.
So I like that they stripped away the Joker aspect of that. She just is her own individual, and she has her own ideas, which leads into two. And that is, in many ways, I like the fact that this version of Harley Quinn she's a very femme fatale-esque individual. And she's very much she's not that different to Batman. She's out for justice, but in a very sadistic way.
Yeah.
She's going after the wealthy. She's going after all of those people. She's out for justice against the people who are doing wrong, and these people that are doing wrong are constantly the wealthy and the powerful. And so I liked that aspect about this version of Harley Quinn.
Very much so.
It's I suppose there were some people who weren't apparently that enamored with the Harley Quinn Montoya relationship. Did that bother you?
Not at all.
Mm-mm.
Not in the slightest.
Yeah.
It didn't. I mean, it's just a love story, isn't it? And it's one that's presented. Well, and it's a doomed love story. We know it can never sort of happen.
Yeah.
So I quite like that, and it was done. It was done without any sort of virtue signaling or sledgehammers being used. It was done. These two just fancy each other and want to go on a date together, and I think that's brilliant. I think that's just how it should be. Quite frankly,
I thought it was a pretty nicely handled relationship. The only thing I thought about really, and based on what I was reading online, morons online who were upset about this, was one of the big gripes was that it's the 1940s. So that kind of a relationship would have all sorts of problems. But I'm also like, this is this is like multiverse. This isn't our reality. Like
No.
it's fine. It's just let it go.
And
not historical fiction, guys.
No, and these relationships still happened.
Yes.
And they would have been supported by certain people, by some people. Yeah. And it's not a case of, well, it was in the 40s, so it must never be shown to have happened, because it did. Famously in some cases, it did.
Yes. So I suppose the only like, if I were to like add a question mark to it, would be that the only kind of gay relationship in the whole show just happens to be one of them is a massive villain. And sometimes that can become a very easy trope of you know what I mean? And so that was the only thing. I was like, you could have made Barbara and Montoya lesbians, Well,
you could. It's an obvious, we'll come on to why they've changed Barbara, but it's an obvious conflict waiting to happen, isn't it? Yeah. Have a goodie fall in love with a baddie. Yeah.
It is. So on that side, like, it's fine, but I guess it's just that other element of, if you kind of like, we see that trope quite a bit of, okay, the gay person is actually the bad person. Well, Montoya is not bad, but
Montoya's not bad, and I did quite like the way that Harley's sort of wants to have a normal life as well. Yeah, she wants to have a relationship, and what's wrong with that? We're all entitled to one. But and she's doing what she's doing behind the scenes, and in the behind closed doors, she's doing what she's doing as Harley Quinn. But she wants to have a normal life outside of that, and that's something that Bruce Wayne has yet to learn. He's not even aware that he's got to do that.
Yes.
So I don't know. Maybe that there's a nice sort of opposing reflection there, isn't there?
I think so.
Of Quinn and Batman, because as you rightly say, she is doing what Batman is doing. Yeah. In this.
Yeah. While we're on the subject of changes and things, well, I mean, we might as well bring up Penguin. So this whole kind of version of Batman has been, this show has been sort of labeled as or said to be sort of more of a feminized version of the Batman story. So there's gender swapping going on. So the Penguin, instead of being Oswald, is Oswalda. It's a lady. She has her own organization. She's got she has kids that are her sort of ducklings that are a bit stupid and do what mommy tells them. And I do feel like in some ways the show sort of knew that this was going to be talked about online, particularly because of the way the male cops get really pissed off when Montoya is brought in by Gordon to lead the investigation into Batman.
Yeah. Right.
Like they are the internet dude bros who are like, like I definitely thought, oh, okay, these guys are those, and they're gonna get really angry about this sort of stuff. But I for one, I thought the lady version of the Penguin worked really well, because we're talking about DC Comics. We're talking about multiverse after multiverse after multiverse after multiverse. You're telling me there's no multiverse where the Penguin is a woman?
Absolutely. I have no problem with it. I mean, I can understand that somebody might think it's a change for change's sake. But so what? It didn't bother me in the slightest, because the character hadn't changed. Still wants to be the top gangster in the city. Yeah. Still looks like the Penguin. Still acts like the Penguin. Brilliantly voiced by Minnie Driver, and lethal.
Murdered her own child.
Murders her own children by putting him in a suitcase and dropping him in the ocean, and then went back on swimming. Is he swimming, or he's in a bat submarine, whatever he's in? He passes loads of those suitcases, so she's done it like loads of times. And one of them's got a fresh skeleton in it, which is obviously the son. That's brilliant touch.
I mean, one of the main reasons why they did it, or the show said that they did it, was because they were like, Batman doesn't really have that many female villains outside of Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy, and Catwoman. You know what I mean? Like outside of that, like you don't
Who
really
else?
see any
No.
others. So they're like, well, we thought, well, let's find one that we can change. And I think that one worked really well. I mean, you could have done it with Two-Face. You could have done it with anyone in this series. But
I was just going to say, I don't think you could actually. I don't think it would have worked as well. Well, I mean, they could have done, but I'm not sure it would have worked as well if they had a female Two-Face, or a female, Joker, say, for the one of female Riddler.
Well, that's Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
A female Riddler could work. That could work. Absolutely.
A female Riddler could work, I suppose. Yeah,
definitely.
But of them all, if I looked at all of Batman's Rose Gallery, the Penguin is the one that would instantly occur to me to swap gender, because there's just something about the original character that makes it almost a sort of logical step to take. I preferred this Penguin to the one in the Batman animated series, I have to say, which was too obviously a Danny DeVito rip-off to me back in the day.
Yes.
So I thought it worked fine. I thought it was great. I thought, why not? Yeah. Plus, free advertisement in it, free advertisement, because people will talk about it online.
Exactly.
And as they say, there's no such thing as bad press.
There were a couple of episodes that I thought were really sort of stand out when it came to the noir element.
Yeah.
Of the show. One of those was Kiss of the Catwoman.
Oh yes.
Third episode.
Yeah.
I mean, what a fantastic episode.
Brilliant episode.
I loved that. One, this is the episode where we're introduced to Harley Quinn, and Batman is going through therapy with her, and that's we've talked about that. That's a lot of fun. But again, there's nods throughout that particular episode where Catwoman is like, "You have toys," which is a very much a Michael Keaton. Where does he get those wonderful toys?
Yeah.
You know that's what that's from.
Yeah.
But I love what I like so much about this version of Catwoman is it's like, oh my God, like this is the first time we've seen Catwoman in a very, very long time where she's actually just Catwoman. She's just a jewel thief. Like I think about like Michelle Pfeiffer. She's wonderful and she's gorgeous, but she's not that Catwoman. She's like Danny DeVito's Penguin. She's her own version of Catwoman.
She is Batman Returns Catwoman, and no one does it better. For the avoidance of any doubt, no one does it better. But she belongs only in that universe, in that one particular film.
Yes, and that is fine with me. But then you got shows like things like the Catwoman movie with Halle Berry, which has no resemblance to Catwoman whatsoever. Or you have, the Batman, the Matt Reeves movie. That version of Catwoman is really boring to me. Gotham, the stupid TV show we've already mentioned. That's The Dark Knight Rises. It's we've had so many versions of Catwoman out there that's like, and so many of them just haven't really been like what she is.
Yeah,
so I just thought it was wonderful to just have this like charming, sexy, enticing femme fatale who is just constantly wagging her tail underneath Batman's nose.
Yeah.
While she's breaking into places and stealing jewels and being all cutesy and getting by with it in court and stuff.
Yeah, I agree with all this. One thing I do like about Michelle Pfeiffer is that she'll flirt with him and then smack him in the face, or stab him in the side.
Yeah.
So he doesn't know whether he's going to get, a kiss or a punch. I like that side. And there's an element of that here. But I also like the fact she's gone back to her roots as well. I think it's a sensible move. A lot of because Batman is so often on the screen, by which I mean there are so many versions of him. There is a sense now that people take these characters and do the same things with them and just put them in different situations.
Yeah.
And what this does brilliantly is go back to the beginning, and it goes back to those original Bob Kane stories and Bill Finger stories, and says, what was Catwoman? And she was a jewel thief.
Yeah.
But what they've done in this, and I don't think this is Catwoman's backstory in the comics, but I'm willing to be proven wrong in any comments. She's the daughter of a man who's in prison for tax evasion. So she was rich, like Bruce Wayne was rich, but now she's got nothing, while he still has everything.
Yeah.
So again, it's this mirror image of Batman, who, as we've said, isn't always around, and isn't in it very much.
Yeah.
But his reflection's there all the time. His aura is there all the time. His suggestion is always there. He's like a big spectral shadow across the whole of the city, because there are people that are him if life had gone differently.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really nice touch. I think that's really, really good.
Yeah.
And she's a brilliant character to do that with. She's a brilliant character in a different way to how they do it with Harley Quinn. There's so much layering in this writing. It's brilliant. It's magnificent.
Yeah.
So this is my favorite Catwoman for a long, long time.
I wish we got more of her. I will say the only thing that annoyed me about that episode was it was bogged down by the Batman origin story, which we just did not need.
We don't need to see it again. We all know Bruce Wayne's origin story. We know
Got it. There's a really cheesy moment with this where, like, Alfred is asleep. He wakes up, and young child Bruce is standing at the end of his bed or in the doorway, and young Bruce just says, "They're going to pay. They're all going to pay, and you're going to help me." And I'm like, lock this kid up, Alfred. Lock this kid up, because like he's possessed by the devil. He is Damon.
Yeah, he is.
Like,
I was just going to ask you what you thought of that, because when you talked about Bruce Wayne's parents being killed, that's like almost the next scene, isn't it? And I
hated it.
We didn't need that.
Nope, not at all. I would have loved just more of Catwoman like that. I love the scene. Last thing I'll say was I love the scene where he saves her as she's falling off the building. They have that little smoochy scene, and it's funny because they like smooch the entire way down. It's that really like classic femme fatale PI having a smooch, and then after this long kiss goodnight, he just pulls her off and says, "Stop wasting my time."
Yeah, and I also like the bit where she says she's been shot in the leg or something, hasn't she? She's been hit by a bullet, and he patches her up and then leaves her there handcuffed to a table or whatever it is.
Yes.
And she says, "You're not very nice," and he just goes, "No, I'm not."
No. I mean, that's very Sam Spade. That is exactly what Sam Spade does with Bridget O'Shaughnessy in the end of the
It's exactly what he does. Absolutely, it's exactly what he does.
Yeah,
I'm not going to be a patsy for you. I'm not going to. You killed him, and you're gonna pay for it.
Yeah.
And when you come out, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
It's very Spade.
I love it. And that's and I think that's because Spade is a very aloof character, and you can feel that. Like I said, you can feel that with this version of Batman. The other episode that was very noir to me was Moving Target, episode 7, which coincidentally is the title of a Ross MacDonald Lou Archer novel, who was the next big private eye after Mike Hammer. So not a coincidence.
No, that's not a coincidence.
No.
And this is, I think this is as noir as the series gets.
I think so.
This is, I mean, this could have been a noir film of the 40s and 50s.
Definitely.
Just with a bit more meat to its bones, so that it had a suitable running time. The story of this episode is a film noir waiting to be filmed. I think it's probably the best episode.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know what episode this is about, this is the one where they think there's a threat on Commissioner Gordon's life, and someone tries to shoot him on the steps of the courthouse. They rush Barbara and Montoya and a couple other people, try and rush him to a safe house. And there's hijinks along the way as they're being chased by assassins. This one is like you said, so noir. I mean, you've got corruption at all angles, dirty cops, gangsters, assassins, misdirection, revenge plot. But you have at the heart of it this really interesting, this is what I loved about, we haven't really talked about Gordon and Barbara, Commissioner Gordon and Barbara yet, which we might as well hear. I love the juxtaposition between the two, in that Commissioner Gordon is putting the bad guys away, and she's the one who is, she's the defendant. She's getting them off.
She's getting them off. I love the dichotomy of that, and I love the fact that, because it's very often a tension between the criminal justice system. It's what Law and Order is all about, isn't it? That the cops go out and do the dirty work and expect justice, and the lawyers play tricks and games in a load of flummery. In this country, a load of flummery with wigs and gowns.
Yeah.
It, and they do all they can to undo the work of the cops, so that there's always that tension between the two sides of law enforcement. So to make that father and daughter as well, to sort of personify that in a father-daughter relationship is brilliant.
Yeah,
because it works so well, because they're obviously, you can imagine, you don't see it very often, but you can imagine them arguing over the dinner table.
Oh God, yeah.
About a case, or about something that she's done in the courtroom, or how an arrest has gone down, or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
because she's a pretty spunky character as Barbara in this.
She is. I love this version of Barbara.
I love this version of Barbara.
It's by far my favorite version that I've seen I mean, we haven't really had many versions of Barbara Gordon, really.
No.
In stuff. I mean, she's been in cartoons and things like that, but this is by far the best.
This is the best.
I've seen.
For too long, really, she's been just that character who gets paralyzed by the Joker in Killing Joke. That's really been her agency for a long time, for far too long.
Yeah.
What this has the potential to do is lift her from that.
Yeah.
Make her a character in her own right, and a strong one at that. Be interesting to see if she does the Batgirl thing. I don't know.
I'm really hoping in season 2 she dons Batgirl, because just do it. I want to see it. Because I also love the building relationship between Batman and Barbara throughout this. He keeps doing the thing where he sneaks into her office, and there's this kind of comedic moments where she's like, "Can you just use the door?" Which I loved. I thought that was just charming and fun and very Batman-y and great. But I feel like she's seeing him, and I feel like she's learning something, and I feel like she's, something will have to snap for her that will make her.
I think it will. Well, something will go wrong in the courtroom, won't it? I suspect. She's another, like Montoya, she's another character who is initially hostile to him, but starts to see, he saves her a couple of times, doesn't he? And he starts to see what he's about, and all we need now is for him to see what she's about.
Yes.
For him to have a strong ally, for him to open his eyes a little bit, which, again, I have no problem with how he is at the minute, as long as they do something with him in series 2. Yeah. But this version of Barbara, like this version of Catwoman, and like this version of Harley Quinn, all these are strong female characters that are doing something interesting and that have their own agency, I'll say it again, outside of Batman.
Yeah.
They don't need Batman to be interesting characters. They don't need a relationship with Batman to be an interesting character and to have plots of their own, stories of their own and backstories of their own. They stand on their own 2 feet, and it's brilliant to see.
Yes, it's interesting. It reminded me a little bit of, I'm going to bring Smallville into this for just one quick second. And that is, anytime you watch an episode of Smallville and Clark has a conversation with his dad or goes to his dad for a chat, you'll notice that Jonathan is always doing something. He's always working on a piece of equipment. He's always fiddling with something. He's always doing something, because his life doesn't revolve around his son.
Yeah. Well, that's the same sort of thing.
That is what is happening here, and I really enjoyed that. The world isn't revolving around Batman. The world is revolving around crime and corruption, and Batman is swooping in and out and weaving in and out of their lives.
That's really the point I was making before. That's what I was trying to say before, that he appears when he's needed.
Yeah.
I dig and that. He goes into their lives. They're not satellites to him.
Yes.
And it's much more interesting.
Definitely.
That way, it's to retain some sort of mystery to Batman,
Yes.
And these 3 female characters, animated, how much more depth and texture and layering is there in these characters than, for example, Emily Blunt in The Fall Guy that we talked about a couple of episodes ago? Big screen writers could learn a lot from this sort of writing.
Yeah, well, Tim is clearly doing what he wanted to do, and that is he is telling mature stories.
Yeah.
But he's doing it in such a smart way, because I would have no problem whatsoever letting my kid watch this show.
No.
It balances things so perfectly, a bit like the 90s X-Men TV show and even the 90s Spider-Man show. There were a lot of really heavy adult themes in those cartoons that you don't really catch as a kid, but I've rewatched them recently and I'm like, oh crap, this is like this is really adult. And I think this is very much in that vein.
So do I.
I'm just pleased that Tim has been able to do this level of like serious but fun Batman that he wanted to do back in the 90s.
And as a sort of add-on to that, I also like the fact that there are episodes which are obviously payoffs to all these adult themes and darker issues that are being discussed in these, where they are pure fantasy. So those are the ones for the kids. If there are, if there are any episodes designed to be purely for the kids, it's these. So the ones like the Gentleman Ghost episode,
definitely,
pure fantasy. But even those, the one that's set in the fairground where she's stealing their souls, whatever she's stealing their energy, whatever she's doing, where every single kid in that is a Robin.
Yes.
And again, if you know your Batman, you'll pick up on that. If you don't care and you don't know and you've not lost anything. Brilliant little touch.
Yeah.
But that is a very, again, fantasy story, fantastic story. By which I mean it is of a fantasy, not brilliant. And that's a sort of payoff, I think, for all the ones that are deeply noir. For every moving target, there's a Gentleman Ghost. That's. I'm not going to say they're light-hearted because they're not, but they are children's cartoons. Whereas the others, and the darker episodes and the noir episodes, are very much adult cartoons.
Yeah,
that kids can watch. As a series, as a 10-episode series, I think it's very well balanced.
Yes, it is. There were two big things that I guess, well, three big things.
There are four big things.
There were five big things. No, there were three big things that I really didn't want or need in this series. One was the Batman origin story.
Yeah.
Two, which we can talk about now, and that is the Harvey Dent stuff.
Harvey Dent, yeah.
I just don't care anymore about Harvey Dent. I'm so bored with Two-Face. I'm so bored with the good guy Harvey Dent gets his face effed up. Now he's all mean, and I didn't like the sort of, he turned into like a cheap Gollum from Lord of the Rings. He was like, absolutely. Where did that come from?
Two-Face is quite a two-dimensional character, isn't he? Really?
Yes.
So the mileage they've got out of him is he can't do anything new now. Again, there's the element of it that, he's Bruce Wayne's best friend and he falls from grace. Well, so what? I've seen that. I've seen it. And I didn't think this Two-Face was as good as the one in the 90s. In terms of character design.
Very
in the 90s episode, where Two-Face is created in the 90s episode, there's a bit where he comes out of his hospital room. And there's a storm outside, and he looks to his wife, and the lightning illuminates his face, and for a split second, it's a painting. He doesn't move. It's a painting, and you can see the detail on the scarring, and it's absolutely magnificent. He's never looked better. He's never looked better.
Yeah.
And this one it looked like Donald Pleasance in Halloween 4. I
mean, they're trying to be realistic because they're like trying to be real 1940s as much as possible. But I just think if you're going to do that,
just give me an episode with a ghost in it. I can accept that Two-Face has got comic book scarring.
Yeah.
If anything, it made me think, well, why have you bothered? You're not going to make Two-Face look horrific. Why'd you bother?
Yeah.
And I agree about Gollum. That's a good point. That's a good point that all that sort of split personality talking to himself just don't buy that.
And it's just like, you literally did The Dark Knight. We've already seen this in one of the biggest, most popular Batman movies of all time. Yeah. This is beat for beat. Like, because once Harvey becomes Two-Face in The Dark Knight, he doesn't last very long. He dies really quickly. It felt weird to me that they retreaded this version of Two-Face.
Me too. And especially when they've done something so interesting and so different with others. Why not do it with Harvey.
Yeah.
Why not do something really off the wall or really interesting with him? No.
I'm glad that they killed him off. I'm glad that he's dead because I don't want to see him again. Thank God he's dead. Again.
No.
I will say the most weird thing that Batman does in that 2-part episode is after Harvey gets shot, he picks up the gun and shoots around the head of the copper who killed Harvey, and then gets really angry and chucks the gun into the river. Why?
Yeah, why?
That's evidence. That's evidence. Batman, you're the world's smartest detective. What the f are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
it don't make any sense.
No. That one just was bizarre to me. But there are things that are cool about those last 2 episodes because there's a lot of building relationship between Barbara and Batman and Gordon, and there is stuff to like about those episodes. But I just don't need
all of which is more interesting than Two-Face.
Absolutely.
The third thing that we're going to mention in a minute, we've had enough of him. Well, I've had enough of him because he's been done to death.
Yeah,
as has the Joker.
Yes.
And
we got a post-credit scene of some guy injecting people with some sort of laughing, goofy serum.
And I have to say, my honest reaction to it when I watched it for the first time, in fact, I think I texted you and said,
you did.
There's no Joker. Well, thank God for that. There's no Joker. Yeah. And as soon as I sent the text, there he is. Spoke too soon. It's a great example of spoke too soon. And I thought, the last 60 seconds of 5 hours or whatever it is of this show.
Yeah.
And you've put him in. Couldn't you just have at least waited? So that I had a Batman story or several Batman stories where he isn't even mentioned.
Yeah.
But they just can't seem to help themselves. And it really annoys me. Really annoys me now.
I'm fed up with it because, I mean, the takeaways from this series are, the villain in The Moving Target, how do you pronounce his name? Onomatopoeia. Like, he was cool. This version of Clayface was cool. This version of Harley Quinn was fantastic. Catwoman was cool. Penguin was cool.
I'd love to see what they'll do with the Scarecrow. I'd like to see the Scarecrow in there.
Definitely be up for that, But it's just like, stay away from Two-Face. We've seen it. Stay away from Joker. We've seen these guys. They dominated the 90s. They dominated the 90s in film and in TV. Yeah. And then in the early 2000s, they dominated again because of The Dark Knight and then Batman, Gotham and stuff like that. So it's like, just
stop.
Just stop it. I mean, because if you think about it, like I said, we've had Jack Nicholson, who was the Joker. Then you had Mark Hamill, who was a huge Joker in the 90s. Then you had Heath Ledger. And then you have him in Gotham. But then you have Suicide Squad that has Jared Leto as the Joker. And that was all over the place. And it's just like they reintroduced the Joker in the end of the Batman. And you're just like, oh, my God, you just haven't stopped.
I remember when Death in the Family came out when I was at school and he kills Robin, kills Jason Todd.
Mm-hmm.
That was shocking. That was a really, really shocking at the time. And that scene is haunting. Well, it was to a 14, 15-year-old me, where there's a panel with him just bringing the crowbar down.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, God, gee, that is brutal. But that was then. Now, I don't need him now because he's been rammed down my throat too many times. Far too many times. And whether you're a fan of these performances or not, between Nicholson, Hamill, and Ledger, where do you go?
Put it on ice. That's where you go.
That's where you go. Yeah.
So that was the disappointing. That was sort of an ugh moment at the end of a relatively fantastic.
Yeah, and it'd been brilliant all the way through. I'd enjoyed every episode. Until
the only episode I didn't like, and I say this lightly, was the carnival episode. That was my least favorite.
Yeah, that was my least favorite.
I got bored. I was bored with that one. As much as I didn't like Harvey Dent being retreaded, there was so much to like about that episode outside of the Harvey Dent stuff. Like, I do like when the two goons pick him up and he's like, "What is this?" And they're like, what do they say? They're like, "This isn't a breakout. It's the big sleep," which Chandler reference massively there.
Massive.
Stuff like that there was charming stuff even in that final two-parter. But that one for the fairground episode was by far
Yeah, I wasn't a lover of that one.
So on that note, should we do our rating?
Should we rate? Yeah.
All right. So we rate all of these films and or TV shows out of 5 Falcons, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. So Matt, we'll start with you. How many Falcons out of 5 would you give the Batman Caped Crusader?
I'm giving it, and I'm going to use your phrase, a solid 4. And I'm knocking 1 point. Well, I'm knocking half a point for the Joker and half a point for Two-Face.
That's fair enough. I'm also 4 Falcons for me for those reasons. For those reasons that we mentioned: Joker, blah; Two-Face, blah; Carnival episode, a little bit boring; and Batman's origin story. It's enough to knock it down to a really strong 4.
It's a strong 4.
It's solid.
I put a caveat on my scoring of it sort of pains me to do it because I thought this was the best Batman we've had for a long time. I am that angry about Joker and Two-Face being in it that I can live with the pain.
I can imagine this being a studio note. You got to put one. You got to put one real big villain in the end.
Yeah,
we don't want to do Joker. We got to do Two-Face then. All right, fine, we'll do Two-Face.
I can imagine that because that's the sort of thing that Hollywood studio people think they know about us. I would much prefer to see a lesser villain teased. I think teasing the Scarecrow would have been fabulous. I am desperate to see Dr. Hugo Strange. If Bruce's new therapist was Hugo Strange and that was the cliffhanger, I'd be chomping at the bit for series 2. We didn't get it. We got the Joker. Again.
I think this is the thing. This is, in many ways, there was so much wonderful indulgence in film noir style and tropes and nods and classic Hammer horror, as you said, horror, Universal monster horror stuff going on. There's a lot of history baked into this show, and it the people, Bruce Timm, everyone kind of running this show. You can tell that they know what they're doing and they know their stuff, which is why it is really such a solid season, and I highly recommend it, and I think you do as well.
I highly recommend it, and it's refreshed Batman for me. He's one of my favorite characters of all time, and he was in danger of being overexposed, ironically, since he should always be in the shadows. And this series has done a lot to redress that balance for me, because I am excited. I am more excited about series 2 of this than I am for the Batman 2, for example.
Same. Yeah, absolutely. I don't care about James Gunn's Batman movie. I don't care about the Batman 2, but I'm all about Caped Crusader season 2 because if by some miracle Bruce Timm gets to listen to this podcast, I would beg him to give Bruce Wayne a bit of character development, introduce some of the lesser known villains, especially Strange, and otherwise keep doing what you're doing, because this is really good stuff. Well, that wraps up our investigation. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another case. In the meantime, please like and subscribe, and be sure to take care walking down those mean streets.